My name is Robert Nashak. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Survios. We are a Culver City-based virtual reality games company. We come out of the mixed reality lab at USC, where the founders work side by side with Palmer Luckey as he was developing his HMD. These guys had a vision to do full body, more immersive VR than even just a head-mounted display. So you're more than welcome to visit us anytime, and we'd love to have you come by to demo what we're up to. We have a very, very distinguished panel. Before I introduce them, or have them introduce themselves actually, can I just get a show of hands? Who here feels they're very experienced in VR? Who here has no experience in VR, but you're VR curious? Awesome. All right, that helps set it. So I would just recommend the panelists to try to avoid jargon and try to explain yourselves a little bit. But we're here the purpose of this panel really is to cut through the bunk, cut through the hype, and get to what's the real deal here with VR and AR. And this is the best panel in the world to actually answer that for us in general. So extremely happy that we're all gathered here together. So why don't we go down the row, and I would ask each panelist to introduce themselves very briefly, and then we'll do a deeper dive afterwards. So Andy?
My name is Andy Cochran. I am a digital and interactive director at Murata Studios here in Marina del Rey. We're sort of a multi-platform content creation studio. We do a lot of traditional work in commercial, music video, film, even print work. Our digital and interactive side does everything from mobile and tablet apps and web experiences to VR and AR, even installations and live events like projection mapping and other types of installations. So we kind of have a very wide base, a lot of different verticals, but the company is completely flat within it. We don't have departments. Our commercial department is the VR department, is the installation department. So everybody in the company works on everything. I'm a commercial director, I'm a visual effects supervisor, I'm a technical director, I'm a interactive and new media director. Everyone wears a ton of hats at the company, and it basically changes from project to project.
Yeah. Would someone in the back mind just shutting the door so we can reduce noise? Thank you very much. Extra points to you. You get the first question later. All right. So Guido?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Guido Voltolina with Nokia. I'm the head of the presence capture division. Our division is the group that announced and is delivering the OZO camera as a specific camera to capture 3D, VR, and audio and video. The whole business unit will focus on VR, so we will roll out technology as well, products. At NAB, we show, for example, the live streaming of what can be captured by OZO in order to enable the broadcasting for VR. As a background, display technologies in general, and just joined Nokia about a year and a half ago just to wrap up this program.
Thanks, Guido. Joel?
Hi, my name is Joel Susel. I work at Dolby Labs, where I lead our virtual and augmented reality business. What we've done in the virtual reality space is take our technology called Dolby Atmos, which has been used by the top cinematic and episodic television content creators to create the most immersive experiences in cinema and television. And we've adapted that technology for use in virtual reality. Which is critical because it's an audio object-based solution that allows content creators to place the sounds very precisely where they need them. In addition to the precision of having an object-based technology, it also provides flexibility that's becoming increasingly important in the realm of virtual reality, like the ability to define whether certain sounds should track with your head or not. So we have taken our content creation tools that were previously limited to cinematic and episodic television, scaled them down to run in software. Those tools are in beta right now, and we have a corresponding playback solution that we believe together renders the best, most immersive, most presence-filled experience for audio in VR.
Thanks, Joel. Michael?
I'm Michael Yang, Managing Director with Comcast Ventures, probably the lone VC on the panel up here. We're a 17-year-old venture fund that manages direct investments on behalf of Comcast Corporation. We have invested in 5 VR, AR companies over the last couple years. Only 3 have been announced, and they are AltSpace VR and more the social communication space, NextVR in the live broadcasting VR space, and Baobab Studios, which is an animation content studio. But happy to share my thoughts on what we're seeing in the startup ecosystem, as well as some perspectives that we've gleaned from interactions with various large media companies.
Great, thanks. And Mark.
Hello, Mark Turner. I run corporate partnerships for Technicolor, and with a special focus on VR and AR, because it is in desperate need of some sort of structure around this entire ecosystem. And I think we're probably the only company in the world that actually covers everything from on-set live capture through visual effects, through post-production, through color grading, all the way through delivery. We have compression algorithm experts in France, and all the way down to set-top boxes. We're actually the second largest manufacturer of set-top boxes in the world. So we kind of cover the entire span, and when something like hugely disruptive like VR and AR and MR come along, we're going to define all those, for those that don't know what they mean, then we have to pay attention.
So that's great. So you can see we have a great opportunity here to do a deep dive into virtual and augmented reality and mixed reality. Does anyone on the panel, before we do a deeper dive into what you want to work on, define those 3 terms?
I can. Virtual reality it's this term that's been put on top of a lot of different things. There's 360 video, which is a video that sees in 360 that can be mono or stereo. Some people say immersive cinema or immersive video. They're very similar. And then there's sort of real-time rendering. Basically, it's a headset that you put on with maybe controllers, maybe not controllers, and you are presented with a virtual reality. That can be, in varying degrees of immersiveness, varying degrees of interactivity. As I said, as a catch-all phrase, it's kind of lumped over a lot of very, very, very similar things, but that's it. It's you put on a headset, you see a reality that is not yours. You're transported into a different place. Augmented reality, basically, instead of blocking your eyes and presenting only the virtual reality, opens the eyes and lets you see through the screen. So it basically, in real time, composites imagery onto the real world. Some people would argue that augmented reality can be entirely audio-based. That's if you kind of expand AR to be, again, a big catch-all term that basically says any use of technology that augments reality, that layers some kind of artifice onto reality. So that could be glasses that show you things like HoloLens, if you've seen their stuff. It could be audio-based. It's basically anything that basically allows us to put content into the real world, make it seem like it's real world. You'll hear terms like mixed reality, cinematic reality, blended reality. A lot of that is intentional marketing designed to blur the line between VR and AR. It depends on how much into the weeds you want to get, but it's basically VR, the world goes away, AR, we add to the world, and then there's all kinds of shades within that.
Very clear, right? Do you want to add something?
I would add there's a new term, RR, that people have been tossing around, which is real reality. And
you sound like a pirate.
We've been calling it IRLR.
And I mean, it may sound a little trite, but here's kind of you'll think about it and you'll get it. The one description I've heard to describe the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality, and let's see if I get this right. In virtual reality brings realism, or brings reality into your virtual experiences. So where you would normally escape, these experiences now feel more real. Augmented reality does the inverse of that. It brings the virtual into your reality, meaning it marks up or augments your life, your real life, with hopefully useful or entertaining information.
That's great, very clear. Thank you, guys. Now let's do a little bit of a deep dive. Let's try to bring all of these concepts to life. So I'm going to ask each of you to deep dive a little bit into what you're particularly working on, And if you can't talk about it, maybe something that you've seen that you really like. But let's try to bring these concepts to life for the audience with specifics about what you're interested in and passionate about. Why don't we start with you, Andy, and we'll go down and feel free to interrupt everyone.
Sure. So Murata comes from kind of a lot of traditional mediums, film, TV, commercial, music video. And so our strengths are a very high level of design and a very high technical ability in sort of motion graphics, visual effects. And so when VR came about, we obviously attacked it from where we're strong. And where Murata is strong is those traditional things, live action, CG, VFX, combinations of those. And so we've kind of come into VR a little bit more from the live action side as well as the CG animation side with an infusion of our technical capabilities on the interactive side. Companies like EA and Ubisoft and the really large game companies have been spending decades trying to render really good-looking imagery in real time. So they've got a huge advantage in sort of the real-time rendering side of things. We've got a massive advantage in anything that involves actors, costumes, sets, CG, VFX, any sort of thing that you would call pre-rendered. As VR has expanded, we've been getting deeper and deeper into technologies that allow us to take our skill set and transfer it into sort of a real-time environment. You'll hear a ton of terms being thrown around like videogrammetry, holography, volumetric capture, light fields. At the end of the day, all these terms are describing cameras or render systems that are more on the traditional side, the film, TV, commercial, music video, the world we understand, not games. They're sort of like systems and cameras and technologies that allow you to capture and move around it and look at it from different angles. So it takes you from an experience like a 360 video where you can't move, you can't interact, you can't touch, you can't move around. You basically you are the camera and you're pivoting around and looking in every direction. We're very excited about technologies that allow us to capture video that is volumetric, capture somebody that you can view from every angle. You'll hear a lot of great companies. 8i is doing a lot of really great work in that area. So where we started was live action and pre-rendered CG and VFX. Where we're headed is absolutely real time, but we're coming in sideways. We're coming in through these new technologies that keep our skills and allow us to work on our strengths instead of us trying to kind of fight the Goliath of some of these companies that are decades and decades deep in making very, 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 very good real-time rendering. So that's where we are, and that's what we're interested in.
Have you delivered a user experience that's worth mentioning to us just to bring this to life?
Yeah, so we did 7 things last year. We did an interactive tour for Google. It's 360 video. It was the first time anybody had combined. It actually came out March last year. It was the first time anybody had combined stereospherical video, which is 360 video that's different in each eye, so it's stereo, with stereospherical CG. Nobody at that time, people had done CG, people had done live action, nobody had composited them together. It was interactive, you could kind of look around the room and navigate to different areas in the room, and it had spatial audio. That was a big technology piece for us because it was kind of our first public project after 2 years of R&D, and it demonstrated that we had spent those 2 years working on how do you shoot, how do you edit, how do you do visual effects, how do you render CG, how do you composite, how do you add interactivity, how do you make the app. It basically demonstrated a full stack. And after that project, we did a bunch of others. Did a experience at Comic-Con for the Strain. It's not released. The Google Shop is released. I have a headset if anyone would like to see it. It's a rare bird, so come see me after. That one we had all kinds of things like real-time image effects, like tunnel vision, motion blur. We did 6 headsets were wirelessly synced simultaneously, so people were watching together. So it was more like a theatrical, sort of more like an amusement park kind of communal experience. And then we've done interactive stuff for GE. If you know Google's 360 platform Jump, every single video starts with this little logo that kind of goes Jump. We made that. So we do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And there's a Michigan football app that you can get on iOS, Android, and Gear VR. We did all the post-production on the videos for that with our partners Headcase, who make a very good camera. And they were our partners on the Strain as well.
Great, thanks, Andy. So Guido, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to?
Yeah. So our approach to VR is really focusing on the reality part, not the virtual part. The virtual part is normally computer generated and starts with games. It goes into other applications as well. But looking at the potential market of consumption for VR content, definitely there's an audience that is more interested in being present in places or experiences that are not necessarily computer generated, or they are a combination, as Andy was referring to, where you have special effects, but it's more an environment or an experience that you want to revisit. So we look at two steps. The first major step is that as we grow up, all the picture and video that I was familiar with were all rectangles. In my world, a black and white video would be an old video, and then a color video will be, more recent, and then high def, but they're all rectangles. Cinema is a big rectangle, TV is a smaller rectangle, the iPad is a smaller rectangle. And then suddenly we have this opportunity of playing back 360, and then two levels of 360, 2D 360 that is kind of around you, or 3D 360, and here, for the one that are not expert, don't follow me. So 3D 360 is more immersive. So there's a whole range of definition, as you will hear during these days. But fundamentally, the elements with which you feed your system, your sensor system, either the eye, the ears, and so on, will define how much immersiveness you will experience. And immersiveness is not just being there. There is a lot of emotion that will be triggered by the fact that you are more accurate in providing information that are closer to the way that you are experiencing real life. 3D sound is one step, but the precision in playing back the sound so that if he's talking, I turn and I know exactly where it is. We're very precise as a system, as a human being system, in not just hearing it's coming from the back. We kind of know where to look at. And so when you reproduce all those elements, you try to feed your system the best way possible so that your brain focus on enjoying the data that it's receiving versus adjusting because it's not exactly as it's supposed to be. For the people that experience 3D cinema, for example, you will see that some 3D movies are very pleasant and they feel good, and some other, you just create discomfort. And it's not just the technicality of being precise, technical or not, it's really delivering in a way that allow your brain to focus on the content versus trying to filtering and translating the data that is coming in not the right way and interpreting it. Our focus has been from the very beginning looking at what device can capture the best way possible enough data to then recreate this immersive experience in the best way possible. And of course, there is a playback device that also play a lot into it. But our mission was really to say, okay, if I have to capture today this experience and then playing back, what can I do to capture as many data as possible in a way that is usable? You heard earlier, light field cameras and light field displays is a fantastic technology, but currently that technology would not allow you, for example, to have a camera in a compass size and go around, not to mention the processing behind it. And creating those tools, so we want to enable the community that is a creative community or business community to start producing experiences and define a new way of telling the story, if it's about telling the story, a new business, if can create a new business of either the first row seat or anything you can imagine, and create a tool that is usable today in order to start discovering all this new world of experiences. Ultimately, And that's why our division is called Presence Capture. We believe that the presence, the feeling of being present is really the vision that we have. Either you play with the concept of time machine or space machine, where you go to places and wearing my VR headset, I can be on the Everest, on the space station, in places that I can't afford to go, not just from a money perspective, it's just impossible to go there. Or telling the story where it's a very entertainment moment, but the emotions are really much, much stronger because I feel like being there. And as well, the concept of time machine where you revisit experiences that you might be part of, right? I'm here, I'm with you guys, but what if it's making faces? I don't know, I'm just looking at you guys. And what if I can go back and watch this video, but now this time I'm gonna look at him, and my presence perception of him will be different because I discover things that I was not aware even being there. So those two concepts we believe are really, really valid in creating more and more demand for producing experiences.
Great, thanks. Andy, you did such a good job describing this audio object-based solution. Could you wow us with what experiences are like when that's implemented?
Sure. So the way that we look at I'm just going to set this up a little bit. So I'm sure based on the number of hands that we saw as to people who are novices versus advanced in virtual reality, just to set a little bit of background, you could say there are at least two flavors of virtual reality. There are interactive virtual reality experiences, as Andy mentioned, which are game-like. And the other flavor, if you will, is linear virtual reality experiences, where you could say they're timeline-based, they're pre-renderable. And while they're still interactive to some degree, it's deterministic what's going to happen at a given time. And maybe a simple way to describe the difference between these is an interactive experience is one where you're the protagonist, and a linear experience is one where you're the voyeur. And as Guido said, you could experience as a voyeur the same thing again and again, but choose, and that's the interactive piece, choose to look somewhere else and get a different sense of presence and capture from doing that. So our efforts in terms of audio and driving the industry forward have been primarily focused on these linear experiences, and there are a few reasons for that. One is that while you've all heard of Oculus Rift and HTC Vive and PlayStation VR, I'm sure, these are all heavy-duty devices that are going to provide very immersive experiences, primarily for gaming. They're relatively expensive compared to the alternative. They require generally expensive hardware. They require equipment in a room to be installed. They use hand controllers, and they will be, for gamers, I believe, very, very important. What's nice about these linear experiences is that they can be enjoyed on something as simple as a smartphone with a pair of headphones and something as simple as a piece of cardboard with some lenses in it. So I'm sure everyone has a smartphone and headset already and headphones already. And if the biggest barrier for everyone in this room to experience a meaningful virtual reality experience is a piece of cardboard or some other relatively cheap appliance, then that has a big potential to go mainstream. So for us, our focus has been on that mainstream aspect of virtual reality and bringing the best workflows and the existing best workflows to bear in this market. And so the question was, how does audio play into this? I think Guido gave a good example. From a utilitarian perspective, at the baseline, it's just knowing where to turn so you don't miss the storyline. Right? If someone's trying to tell you a story and they're used to telling you a story in a rectangle, where they know you're looking at every pixel that's being displayed, and if it's in a movie theater, all the lights are off, your phone is off, you have no other distractions, they're very good at directing the viewer where to look. But now, when the screen, if you will, the frame is all around you, at a very base level, the need is for sound, just like in our real reality, to direct us where to look. We use our ears to tell us where to point our eyes. to determine if there's something interesting or dangerous around us. I think, where this starts to get even more interesting from an audio perspective, beyond just the utilitarian, preciseness of audio, is the flexibility, I would say, of having these experiences kind of evolve with you based on how you interact with them. So an example would be, like a dinner party where there are lots of different conversations going on, and maybe you choose which one that you want to focus on, and subtly, but in a meaningful way, that conversation becomes more audible and the others kind of become more diminished. So that's just one of many examples of how this mixture of, even though it's a predetermined and linear experience, how the mixing in a little bit of interactivity poses audio challenges and opportunities, and that's
Not to put you on the spot, but can you give us an example of something that wowed you, audio-based, or it's early days yet?
Well, yeah, first of all, I think from a baseline perspective, it's amazing simply to hear something that's outside of your field of view and turn to precisely face it and see what you expected, right? To see something where you expected something to happen is, I think, very interesting. But I'll give one example of a piece that I saw. It was a piece where it was, take the dinner party example I gave, where you look one way, you get one audio experience, and when you look somewhere else, you get another one. It was a piece where there were essentially two ends of a phone call happening. Okay, so, and if you look this way, you're focusing on one end of the phone call, and if you look this way, you're focusing on the other end. And in both scenes, you see the people on the phone. But when I look over to my left, your right, I hear the person on that end of the phone as if they're not being processed by the phone. And I can hear all of the background noise in that scene as if I were there. And then the audio from the person on the other end is being obviously filtered through what sounds like a telephone call. And so I can choose which way to look. And that was, I think, a very moving and important and exciting aspect of audio in VR.
Yeah, that was super cool. Thanks for sharing that. Michael.
Sure. I'm going to answer the question on behalf of three of our companies and some of the projects that they're working on. So I'll start with Baobab. So at Tribeca, not too long ago, they premiered their piece Invasion, which is their storyline equivalent to War of the Worlds, where it's a nice, cute Arctic bunny fighting the fight against some also relatively cute aliens as well. So the setting is kind of in the winter hinterlands, and there are spaceships and all that kind of stuff. But this will be a serial piece that they've done different versions of it depending on the hardware that you have. So if you have a room scale HMD kind of environment, there's more interactivity. If it's more passive and linear, as referenced here, then you're just kind of looking. So that got a lot of accolades over there, and we look forward to kind of seeing the downstream episodes to that. Next VR, which is more focused on capturing live events, in particular sports events and music events. This weekend, they'll be at the Kentucky Derby. And in collaboration with NBC Sports, they will have 7 cameras around the track from the starting area all the way to kind of the winner's circle. So those of us, if we were really into horse racing, can't be there, you can actually experience dirt on your face and all that kind of stuff as the horses and the jockeys kind of go around the turns and the thrill of potentially winning. So that's going to be interesting, and they obviously have a lot of marquee sporting events kind of, that they've done already and throughout the balance of the year that they'll be producing. And then lastly, AltSpace VR made a couple announcements in the last little bit. One, earlier this year, they announced a partnership with the owners and the makers of Dungeons & Dragons, so that you who are D&D fans can kind of go in there and play with others kind of in that experience. And then I believe it was last week, they announced an integration and partnership with Slack. So for those of you who are more in the enterprise kind of technology space, Slack has become the dominant productivity, worker messaging, communication kind of piece of software. So that's a really interesting kind of non-entertainment obviously use case, but an interesting indicator of where some of this technology could be used in the enterprise and beyond.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. And lastly, let's turn to Mark for some specifics.
Okay. So I'll give you some examples of where we're pushing the boundaries and where the current paradigms that we're all used to fall apart. So if you look at making linear 2D video, I'm not saying it's easy because people pay us a lot of money to help them, but it is at least relatively simple. There are some fairly simple steps you go through. You capture your content, you add overlays, interstitials. If you're on broadcast, you're adding visual effects and stuff if you're a movie, and then you can color grade it, you put it in a mezzanine format, you deliver it to distributors, they deliver it, and it plays on just about every screen that you can own. It isn't until you go to a completely different medium like VR and AR you realize that absolutely everything in that model is broken. There is no standard camera format, there is no mezzanine format, there is no compression system. We're dealing with massive, massive amounts of data, especially if you go talk about light field and things. Everything changes, which is the bit that's interesting and exciting and scary at the same time. So I'll give you some examples that we have worked on and Technicolor works on, but also we own a couple of subsidiaries. One is MPC, the moving picture company, and the other one is a mill, and they've been doing a lot of work on VR projects. So so there's one called Help, which is a Google-funded project, which was interesting because the mill did that one. They actually did it a couple of years ago now, and the issue that they came across when they were shooting that is that the director can't see what he's looking at, right? So he's shooting a 360 video. This one is like a tablet experience, it's 360 video, but it's got Hollywood-style visual effects baked in 3D space. And the problem was the director can't see what he's actually shooting in 360. So they built for the production custom tool that allows the director to put a headset on and actually look anywhere with a live stitching version of all the cameras so they can actually see what it is they're looking at. And then previs, so not the full render, but previs versions of the visual effects in that space as well. Because you do a shoot and you realize you shot it wrong and you have to go back and build the crew again, you're in deep trouble. So that's a kind of interesting one because it kind of proves there are not even on-set tools available off the shelf that you can go and build a project with. So there's that one. Let's talk about, there's another one which I find interesting because it is a experience you can't do in any other medium, right? So this came out of Tribeca as well. It's a piece called 6x9, which again is another mill piece. This one done in a game engine, which is interesting. It's also 9 minutes long, which is kind of long for a lot of people that look at VR things and say they've all got to be short and they've got to be snacks. This one's 9 minutes, but you wouldn't ever know that you spent 9 minutes in it. It is deeply absorbing. And the interesting thing about it is not crazy in your face, big explosions and things coming at you, and it's very subtle, but it also can't be done in any other medium. And I'll tell you what it is. You're in a 6x9 cell and you're experiencing isolation in an American prison cell, and it's a social commentary. It's a documentary, effectively, but in a VR space. But you can't do it in another way because it moves your viewpoint in different places. It does a lot of stuff with audio, and you've got different people talking to you, and there's things projected on the walls. If anyone hasn't done it, you should go do it. It's very, very interesting because, it breaks down this idea of, just taking what we used to do and plugging it through a 360 viewer and calling it, a radically different medium. So I'd mention that one, and then there's some other ones that we've been doing. There's ones where we put you in the place of a baseball batter facing 100-mile-an-hour baseballs, which is kind of interesting to try and put people out of their comfort zone. We've done horror movies, which are scary as hell if you've ever seen them, and we've done demos where people actually are crying when they take the goggles off. I mean, deeply scary, isolationist type stuff. So there's some of the examples of the projects we've been.
That's very helpful. What was the one called? The Walk? Did anyone do that one?
Sony, yeah.
It was basically recreating Philippe Petit's tightrope walk between the Twin Towers. and it is scary. Has anyone done it? You basically are, it's right. Enough said. You can imagine. Anyway.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. That was very, very helpful and instructive. Let's turn to VR adoption and AR adoption. There was a lot of hype in the last few years around VR and AR, as we all know. Recently, you've heard people like John Riccitiello, the former CEO of EA, who's now the CEO of Unity, a big game engine, saying that he expects there's going to be a trough of disillusionment around VR. Some people say we're already in that trough of disillusionment, a moment of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, a real FUD moment. New York Post had a headline this week. I loved it. It said, VR will make your children into zombies. My question for all of you, and anyone can answer, and let's have some disagreement, I hope. What's the VR adoption curve going to be like? The consensus seems to be that it's definitely for the long haul, but it might be further out than we initially thought. What do you think sales are going to look like this year? What about the next coming years? And then tied to that is, when does VR become a daily activity? I'm in the business and I'm in VR daily, but at home, when am I going to be at home going, strapping on my headset every single day? And what's it going to take for that? So if anyone wants to talk about what's going to drive VR adoption and what you see the short and long term to be, that would be great.
I can actually almost disagree with the question.
Excellent.
So the problem with VR is that it's insanely difficult to predict. It's proven over and over again that every expert that pops up has been proven wrong.
So VR is the Trump of technology?
It's the Trump of technology. You can't keep it down. I'm not even going to touch that one. John Carmack, now with Oculus, phenomenally brilliant man, was part of the sort of the drumbeat against mobile VR in the beginning. Everyone kind of forgets that because he's now one of the main voices in the drumbeat for mobile VR. Very, very smart people have been very wrong, mainly because they've tried to, really predict this thing. But it's evolving so quickly and involves so many people with so many different ideas and so many technologies that don't exist yet or are not mature enough yet. So in terms of anybody that predicts sort of like sales volumes to the number or headset counts, they're just guessing. Everybody's guessing. We can guess for you right now. We may go down the line and do that. I've got my guesses. But the really important thing about VR is that there are now potentially millions of people that are pulling for it, that are really pushing hard to make content, make tools, make hardware, make software. But it's in beta. The entire industry is in beta. All of VR is in beta. Oculus is in the middle of missing their ship dates like crazy. Sony is not going to ship till October. Nobody truly knows. The only thing that we do know is that we like it. Anybody that tries VR really likes it. Some people do get sick. Some people don't like it. But as a sort of gross, mass general statement, when somebody tries VR, they like it. And because of that, it's going to succeed. I don't know how long it will take. I don't know what it will look like in 10 years. I don't know when it will become an everyday activity. I don't know if it will become an everyday activity. But I do know that it is going to succeed, and it is going to be very big because people want it.
So I would comment on, it's very easy to say that everyone's going to be wrong on the estimates. If you just look at the analyst estimates between the size of the VR market in 2019, they are off by the order of magnitude from each other, which isn't entirely surprising because we've been making content and playing in this space for a couple of years now. But actually, this year is the first year we're actually going to have consumer headsets available, and they're shipping in such low volumes. As I say, it's hard to predict who the audience is, what content really resonates with them, what business models are going to work. No, everyone is estimating off of almost zero data, which kind of points to the energy and excitement of it all. But also, I really see 2016 as the year where we can actually get some data to make some good estimates for 2017 onwards. And until that really starts happening, it's just an interesting playground. I love the phrase, the entire industry is in beta. I think that's very true. Alpha may be even more appropriate.
Ultimately, what you can see with this technology will drive adoption. If there's nothing to see, there's no adoption. There's only games, then the game community will go there. if there are live events for sport, whatever is the sport, the horses, basketball, and each category. And so the enablers, unfortunately, is something we hear many, many times, content is king. But again, content is king because if there's no what I like to watch through this technology, first of all, I will not use it. Then the second step is, if there is that I really enjoy through this technology, is the experience better than what I'm experiencing today, then I will consider, and then how much is it, right? So those are by category. You can do your framing the industry that way, but fundamentally, if there's nothing interesting to look at, of course I'll try for 5 minutes. I'll try it 3 times, but I will not that daily. If the best things I like, whatever it is, sailing, video games, is available, and my 15 or 30 minutes of spare time that express my highest interest is available in VR, and is a better experience in VR than a big TV, a home theater, whatever is the other system, then people will go there. If I'm a fan of a singer or rock group and it's only available in VR, I will just go there because I want to see them. I can care less if it's low resolution, high resolution. I'll force myself to. So ultimately, it's what you show that will drive really adoption.
Yeah, that makes sense. Joel?
I just have a question for the audience. By show of hands, how many people use an iPhone? Okay, and how many of you had the original iPhone? All right, well, that's a pretty good number, but what I would say is this is the first generation of a technology. My crystal ball, if you will, is I think second and third generation is going to be where we see more activity, but I agree with Mark that this is going to be the first real data point that we see this year. And I guess in general, I'm a pessimist, so I do believe there is a trough of disillusionment. We're in it, but we will get through it because of the meaningful experiences that are coming about. So I don't think that's scary. I think that's part of getting things right. It's the challenge of facing all of the different difficulties and opportunities, and ultimately coming up with the value proposition that encourages someone to choose the VR experience over what is currently available to them.
So, Michael, you have a very unique perspective as a VC who's seen basically every VR company out there. So, I would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think we're focused on Q1 of 17 as kind of the key data measurement period. And the reason I say that is I think all the HMD manufacturers have stubbed their toe in varying degrees this year. And unfortunately, we're not going to really have ample supply because they can't get the yield on the manufacturing up until Q4. So the hardware side is exclusively, in our view, a retail holiday season gift giving, gift buying kind of trend. So if you buy it in Q4, what you're going to really know is how you use it in Q1, not actually how you're using it between, call it Christmas and New Year's or something else like that when it's downtime and you're with family. But if it sticks and adoption, retention, and all the key metrics are there in Q1, then I think we're kind of off to the races. The goodness of this is because hardware is delayed, the content creators and the app developers are actually getting more time and a reprieve to kind of fine-tune what they've shot, what they've built, et cetera, and the marketers for both the HMDs and the content creators and app devs can get their story right so that when they do hit it in Q4, cuts through the noise or the value prop is clear as to why you should download this, watch this, buy that, the whole 9 yards. So for us, it's kind of like we're just hanging out, waiting until that period, and then we'll kind of see what we've got.
That's great. Thank you for that. Anything else from the panel before we open it up for questions?
Well, I'll pick up on that point about everyday usage, because I think that is more of an AR, augmented reality sort of thing. That is, I've got glasses on right now. In a few years' time, hopefully they'd be augmented and I'd be getting what I should be saying popping up on my eyes instead of what I am saying, right? That sort of stuff. And you'd never know. That feels like an everyday experience. VR, which is a very insular experience, is much more akin to gaming right now. It's a one-person experience. And until we break the idea of having more of a social VR experience where you can actually do the equivalent of an evening sitting around the TV watching a show with a family, it will remain that sort of one-on-one sort of experience. I mean, it's deeply isolating right now. It drops you in another world, which is very akin to gaming. So we've got some work to do before I think people come home and they don't switch the TV on and they pop on a bunch of VR glasses and go to Mars and walk around.
Okay, you heard it here first. So, questions from the audience? Yeah. Could everyone hear the question? So you want to just, I'll repeat it real quick. Basically, what advice would Michael give to a young startup in VR and AR? Because the market could change. I mean, and I would just add to this, how do you, sustain all this uncertainty and stay alive?
Yeah, it's definitely practice makes perfect, right? So we have always chosen to back VR practitioners who've been doing it longer than anyone else in their respective genre, discipline, vertical, et cetera, right? Because you can't train for it anywhere else. You just kind of have to do it, right? And the good thing about doing it now, if you get it wrong or if it sucks, no one saw it or very few people saw it, so it's not really kind of brand limiting down the road. The second thing is I can't you have to be very thoughtful on the relationships with the HMDs, right? So just like when the iPhone, the iPad came out, Apple had the same issue, scarcity of applications there. Some of the first ones that were there, they may not have been the best, but they all of a sudden kind of were promoted, got downloaded more, and that kind of gave them the runway and exposure to kind of iterate on the product, continue to further that advantage. So you got to be there early with the platforms. Do you have to be with all the platforms? No. I think any one of them, kind of getting in bed with them, affords tremendous luxuries because they're all going to be promoting like heck, in Q4.
Good. Next question? Yep. And then we'll go there. Go ahead.
Okay, so this question is from Michael. So it looks like your company invested in 3 VR companies in the span of 6 months. July 2015, Offspace, and then December, I think the VR animation studio, Next VR. So you did that after HMD has come out with their timeline. So it looks like you invested in a company that has some sport content, premium content, a VR company that has content, and also I think you invested in Slack as well. So there's some combination between Slack and the VR animation company. So it looks like you have a thesis right there on how this company will perform. And Comcast is also a big content company, and VR is very disruptive to the way that we consume content right now. So if you have to talk to Brian, Robert, and Steve about their big VR strategy, what will you tell them? Will you tell them to wait and see, or will you tell them to spend like $100 million to buy this technology?
Yeah, it's actually, Robert had a question for all of us about kind of how does Hollywood interplay with VR, so maybe we can all take a turn kind of answering that. I would say most of Hollywood, and I'd put any kind of premium IP content owner in this bucket, they're looking at VR as a new medium, they're curious. The more progressive ones are considering VR as a marketing tool or marketing tactic where they build a companion piece or something like that to accentuate the IP and draw in the rabid fan base. That's not necessarily a business model, or that's not kind of a clarion call to kind of put more resources down yet, but across the studio landscape, they have people looking at it, tinkering with it, et cetera. But they're not the people that have shot it the most or created it the most or anything like that. That is everywhere else. So at some point down the road, if the studios want to get into kind of larger production efforts, they got to figure out, do I retool, retrain my folks internally, or do I go external? And then you also think about, what is the studio ecosystem best at? Is it actually the creation, or is it more actually in the distribution and the marketing, right? So, I think that each studio has its own kind of different perspective. For sure, given our portfolio, it's not just the 3, we actually have 5 going on 6. Comcast knows all about what we're doing, and they're very interested in it, and effectively we can offer them market research and insights through our portfolio company. But that doesn't speak to a larger strategy, and I think most of the studios are probably in the same situation.
We actually have this conversation a lot with very, very, very large traditional studios networks, companies that own libraries of IP or have a very big presence as sort of content companies. And the conversation always involves kind of the same, it's like, what is VR? And we kind of explain it, and then they go, how do we monetize it? And we go, you can't monetize zero. And then they go, well, then why would we do it? And we go, well, today you should be doing it for marketing, because it's one of the most buzzworthy things you can do. So if you are doing marketing and you're planning on putting a kiosk in Times Square, why don't you do a VR experience instead? So that handles what you're saying, sort of like, who should be making VR right now? Who's going to see financial return immediately? Marketing. But these big companies that have huge presences, Disney, all the studios, Universal, Paramount. When somebody gets a VR headset today, to the one they ask one question: what should I download? What should I watch? And the answer is a startup Jaunt, a startup Verse, a startup NextVR, or New York Times. So New York Times is eating the lunch of companies like Disney, all the studios, all the networks, because they're investing in content right now. They are the answer to what should I watch, what should I download. Not 10 years, a year from now, 2 years from now, when people are starting to get these in high volumes, are the networks and studios going to have another Netflix on their hands, another thing that they discounted and waited to see? Or are they going to get in now and start building the libraries, do it as a loss leader, put out good content, put it out for free, build a platform, so that when people are getting these headsets in the millions and eventually the tens of millions, they remain the answer, what should I watch?
I would add just one more thing. We signed an agreement with a technology partnership with the Disney Group. Mm-hmm. So that involves from ILM to ABC to ESPN. And this partnership is not about phones, it's about VR.
That's great.
And the reason is that the studios, of course, want eyeballs and need an install base before they step into there and they invest it. It is clear now that, without mentioning any specific, that every single new movie that is coming out will have a color trailer and a VR something. Either is meeting the actors, being at the premiere. It doesn't matter what it is. Some marketing activity, all of them, including the non-Disney studios, and that is the first step towards getting more accustomed and perfecting the technology of shooting, of post-producing, or having a quality product out there. And then the next step will be maybe content that justify spending money.
Okay, sounds good. We'll go there, and then we'll go there. Yep.
The focus of the panelists has been primarily on VR, but what about AR and deeper into what the characteristics of the AR market is looking like and the content of that?
It doesn't exist. No, just being a tiny bit facetious. These things have adoption curves, right? AR, as it exists today, is a smartphone pointed at a tracking glyph, and you see something on your screen. That is what AR is. That is not what AR can be, but that is what AR is. The audience for that, the general public, has pretty widely rejected that as a thing that they want to do. We've been jamming it down their throats for years now. And they don't care that they can pull out their cell phone and point at the magazine page and the car pops up. It's not a nice modality. This is not a nice experience. The AR headsets that will enable a VR-like revolution of content creation don't exist yet. You can't buy one. There are developer kits. Google Glass is arguably AR. Again, we can get into semantics, but that no longer exists. you cannot go to Best Buy and buy an AR headset. There's developer kits from Epson. There's HoloLens, which is 5 years out at least. Magic Leap, who knows what the hell they are. So I was being facetious but serious. AR doesn't exist.
Michael, you
I
disagree?
gotta jump in on that one. Yeah, I just came back from Seattle a couple weeks ago and got the full HoloLens demo, and just, you know, one of them is in the architectural space, and I was blown away. You know, traditional PC desktop architectural design application, you know, you're just messing around with your mouse and keyboard, and then you have a physical model that an architect created of a skyscraper and a park and a whole 9 yards, and then you put on the AR HoloLens experience, and then you can drag your mouse from the application onto the virtual space. I can increase the height from a second story to a third story building and look over at the model. Now the model's all of a sudden the third story building as well. This is the future in many, I'd say architectural, real estate, engineering, you know, those kinds of realms. And it's just so much more productive because instead of building physical models to see second versus third floors and all that kind of stuff, you're just more efficient. So we're big believers in AR. We have an investment not disclosed in that space. We've been to HoloLens, we've been to all the major players and seen it. Some of them are more focused on consumer, like Magic Leap, and that's going to be a tougher bar. But the enterprise stuff that Microsoft in particular is pushing, and they're really good at desktop apps and enterprise kind of IT, you know, do not count that out. And there's several other startups that are kind of following in their footsteps.
And to be clear, I was not discounting it. The 5 years is Microsoft's own number on when the HoloLens will be available. That's not my prediction. That's actually Microsoft is saying it's going to take us 5 years to perfect this hardware. So I'm not discounting AR.
But you can get it now.
Yeah.
And people are writing applications.
I think that Michael had the important point. AR is going to be huge. It's going to be there's someone put out some quote that'll replace your iPhone, and completely believe that will be the case. It is, however, much harder to do, and much bigger leap for someone who's creating media content, which is largely what the panel's focused on. Because, I mean, you just take a room like this. It's actually very easy in a VR world to represent this room and drop a dragon in the middle of it, because you can control the lighting, you can control the reflections, but you take this actual room with all you actual people in it and try and drop a dragon in here in real time. With the light coming in from this side, it's got to reflect off the dragon properly, and you guys might want to interact with it. I mean, it's phenomenally harder to do, and therefore further down the line because of that. But the productivity uses for it are going to be enormous.
Yeah, here's a question. You saw the demo. The demo is fantastic. How much hardware was running it? In size. And again, I agree with you. For verticals, for productivity, absolutely.
Sure.
But you know, all those stories that will go around and we overlay and so on.
Yeah,
It
Moore's
will
law
come.
will get us there.
I mean, I'm totally a believer that it will come. But you know, it will come when they can squeeze out that refrigerator down in your pocket.
Another question here?
Yeah, it doesn't think VR is here when it comes to consumer product. And I, as a dad, buy a VR camera that stitches itself and upload it and watch my kids on Christmas morning. You know, a year later, 20 years later, that's the moment when VR is
Yeah.
here. That's the moment everyone buys a VR camera and everyone has a VR headset and this will want that content. So one thing that VR provides is to keep your emotional experiences.
That's right.
So the moment your average person can shoot a VR camera and watch his kids open his present, you know, it's the moment. Right now, you know, if you wanted to do that, you'd have to get a VR, you know, rig with an editor for Christmas and wrap it up and stitch it, right?
No, that's not true. You can get a Ricoh Theta and live stream right now.
Happening, but before this, you know, that's
Sure.
going to happen. So but that's the moment VR is here. So that you can probably tie, you know, with some uncertainty a date for our lives if everyone has a VR.
Yeah, that's the YouTube moment, right? That's when people can self-create. That's the democratization of media, which is fair comment. But there is also there's a difference between, you know, reality and artistry, right? You can shoot this room in 360 now and take it home, but that is a very different place to having a movie director like Chivo that just got three cinematographer, you know, Oscars in a row to actually start shooting content himself in VR. And then you're actually not trying to create reality, right? You're trying to tell a story. in a different reality. So there's a big difference between, you know, your own home movies, which is one use of it, and then there's actually I want to be in a different reality, which is a storytelling medium, which is one that is, you know, still unexplored largely by the big creative talent, but they're coming, and they're coming fast. Right.
So let's end, because it's at the end of the session, with, does anyone have a quick prediction about what the year 2020 would look like?
I think we're going to start seeing some AR, entertainment experiences in AR, which, as I said, is really hard. And I think we're gonna move from having companion VR experiences, which is what we have a lot of right now. Right? Is, you know, there's a movie coming out, so they make a companion piece, but actually storytelling that is adapted for the medium. That
Anyone
is
else
truly
with a prediction?
big enough audience that you could actually do that.
Thanks, Mark.
I would add live events, so it will be a regular stream. In
Everyone
VR.
goes to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Michael?
I would say international is going to be bigger than the U.S.
Believe it. Believe it. Anyone else? Joe?
I'm going to agree with something that Andy mentioned earlier, which is the advance of volumetric video. So today, the way most live action camera captured experiences are captured with a device that has lots of lenses pointed outwards. At some point, we'll get to the point where we have lots of cameras in a space pointing inwards. And at that point, someone who wasn't at this talk, for example, could, in a room scale, walk in and choose any seat and sit down. That's a little further out probably than 2020, but the beginnings of that type of experience will start to become available.
There's a dark horse in VR, which is mobile, and it's going to continue to be a dark horse. We've been working with Google Tango, if anyone has played with that at all. It's more sensors on a device. It'll be a cell phone scale within this month. Lenovo's releasing the first cell phone that has these depth sensors on it. Think of it as, you know, driverless car tech in your cell phone. So your cell phone now knows very well where it is. You take things like Intel RealSense, which is very good at tracking facial features and tracking hands and fingers and doing some of the things that Tango does in terms of looking at rooms and understanding where things are. Those technologies are coming to cell phones. So our ability right now, when we do VR on a cell phone, is limited by a lot of things. It's, you know, how much storage it has, how much video RAM it has, the resolution of the screen, the accuracy of the sensors. Those things are all getting better. There will be 4K screens this year. But as we add these extra sensors, we're going to be able to give you a cardboard experience, a thing that takes your cell phone for a couple dollars and allows you to walk around. It's not going to be as good as a Vive. It's not going to be as good as a Sony. It doesn't have the processing power to do that. But we're going to be able to start adding hands and fingers, levels of interactivity that are currently not possible because we don't have the hardware for it. So you're going to see, as these home, you know, sales go up, this dark horse of mobile, where it's just going to keep eating the lunch of the consoles. It's just going to keep being this big surprise to everybody, and doing, you know, bigger and better and more impressive things that eventually will roll into the consoles and the PC-based things.
That's very interesting. So my prediction for 2020 is that Digital Hollywood will still be doing VR, AR panels. So on that note, a big round of applause for our panel. Great. Thank you very much, gentlemen.